Story 1. This is just to normalize concentrating people in camps in a theoretical way. Get the cult comfortable with it. Many already are, but win over the ones who aren't quite there yet. Then Guantanamo Bay will be too expensive and not big enough for all the undesirables, so they'll just start concentrating them here and calling anyone who protests a woke cuck or something. And once the infrastructure is in place here, they're not going to just stop using it when they've got most of the foreign folks. Story 2. They went from deporting to countries to sending to a concentration camp in a matter of days. Obviously, the first option was difficult, but no one could figure that out. They are outpacing Nazi Germany. We will have gas chambers in a few weeks. Story 3. Der Orangenführer said, and I quote, "It will house the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people." Funny story there. When George W. Bush first set up the prison there to house terrorists, he said, and I quote, "It would house the worst of the worst." They shipped about 800 people there, and then found that about a grand total of 15 of them had any connections to terrorism whatsoever. Story 4. Things are looking a lot like a different significant historical event. The only real hope here is if people getting the orders choose not to follow them. I guess that's anarchy. Better than the alternative. Story 5. The only thing we were taught about Guantanamo Bay was that it's where we send our worst to get tortured and have information extracted, so it's odd that illegal immigrants are being sent there. Story 6. Shady as F***K. Because it is not subject to United States law, only military law. That's why he's doing it there. That's where we tortured war on terror suspects. Not a coincidence. Story 7. I think everyone who compared him to Hitler was right. This is a concentration camp, pure and simple. His willingness to send him to another country versus ours is telling. Story 8. Elections have consequences. For every one of the 6 million Democrats who had a crisis of conscience because Kamala wasn't left-leaning enough for them and stayed home, this is where we are. Story 9. Building a concentration camp and sending people there is completely aligned with the actions of the Nazis. I am not surprised. He is pure evil. This is right up his alley. Story 10. A bunch of innocent people are going to be raped and tortured, abused, but millions of Americans are convinced they deserve it. We are living in truly dark times, so buckle up. Story 11. I feel it's a slippery slope. It starts with immigrants, then accelerates to protesters, then political opponents, and finally to minorities. His administration is canceling student visas. Story 12. Trump's plan is completely unfounded. First of all, Trump claimed he was going to deport 20 million illegal immigrants. If 30,000 are sent to Guantanamo, where does he plan to put the other 19,970,000 deportees? Also, putting people in Guantanamo means United States tax dollars would still be paying to house them, feed them, provide them with medical and legal services, etc. That's not a deportation. That's just a cruel relocation that breaks up their families, and we still pay for housing and feeding them. Story 13. Trump is doing exactly what he promised to do. The plans were all laid out in Project 2025 for anyone who wanted to read them. Oh, and Trump and his associates are all Nazi supporters. Story 14. Okay, so bear with me. Is this an accurate series of events? Trump quotes Hitler's book. Trump uses very similar or actual Nazi talking points. Trump hatches a plan to take people into custody, but a very specific type of people. His mega-rich minion uses a Nazi salute. A new building like a camp is being built to house them. The location of this place basically has no constitutional protections. And yet we're supposed to believe that the people taken there are going to be civilly transported to another location? Since they're undocumented, what are the follow-up options? Am I crazy for seeing Holocaust version 2? Story 15. As a non-American, we think you elected a crazy person, supported by a cult and representatives who seem to have been waiting just for that. Also, where are the Democrats? Story 16. Or we could just give them provisional visas and fair wages to help end the housing crisis, the food price crisis, the crumbling infrastructure, and restart some major manufacturing. But I'm just some crazy liberal who doesn't think putting tens of thousands of people in a black site on taxpayer money is a good use of money and human beings with souls. Story 17. Here's the fun part. He plans to construct a facility that will hold 30,000 immigrants. Currently, it holds a maximum of 800 with fewer than 100 inmates actually there. Who do you think is going to build this facility? Surely not one of Trump's billionaire friends, right? No billionaires are going to profit from government contracts now that Trump is in office, right? Story 18. It's not fair the way we're lumping all illegal immigrants together. People have been trying to say, oh, they're all just coming over here to murder innocent children, and getting upset at me for having empathy for them. Most of these people are trying to escape the dangerous conditions in their country. Men fearing for their lives and escaping gang activity, women and children fleeing with them or for their own safety. No one is risking their lives to jump over the border with the sole purpose of killing children. They could do that in Mexico. It scares me because that could be us in a few years, trying to escape the United States but unable to afford or access the legal way. And yet so many people refuse to allow them to be humanized. Story 19. So, they can be a net positive in the United States by picking up jobs that citizens do not want to do, where they can pay taxes and enrich our country, or we can pay for them to be in a concentration camp where we provide food and shelter for them with tax money. Tough choice. Story 20. Guantanamo Bay should not exist. The entire purpose of Guantanamo is to shield the government from their responsibility to uphold the Constitution and not violate the human rights of prisoners. Story 21. Just a fascist doing fascist things. What, you didn't think there would be camps where they could concentrate all the people they find undesirable? What are those called again? Story 22. It's hilarious because he himself is a convicted felon and adjudicated rapist and sexual abuser who just pardoned 1,500 violent criminals, several of whom have already been rearrested, and one was even killed by police after drawing a weapon. So, to hear the little Trump supporters scream about how they broke the law is very ironic. But no one ever accused them of being smart. Story 23. Here in Montana, the county commissioners decided they should turn the Metropark Stadium into a concentration camp. I guess they are trying to go international with those. Story 24. He's a fascist and we are witnessing our version of Nazi Germany unfold before our eyes. Project 2025 is his plan, and it is very quickly being implemented. Story 25. As a United Kingdom resident, I understand the voters need to overcome the establishment, but I am shocked that Americans re-elected Trump. You absolute fools. Story 26. I think it's pretty clear that the Nazis are back, and literally no one in Congress plans to do anything about it. Trump is following every step, to the letter, in shadowing Hitler's rise. Story 27. Okay, we're all mad and hate it, and it sucks, right? But isn't this dumb from a purely practical standpoint? Wikipedia says they can only hold fewer than 700 prisoners. How are they going to mysteriously hold 30,000 immigrants? This is just more stupid grandstanding for stupid people by a stupid person. Story 28. For everyone who thinks rounding all these people up is a good idea, I have a question. Are you going to be open to working for minimum wage while standing in a freezer cutting apart 20,000 pigs a day? Because there are about to be a lot of openings, and if not filled, our food supply is going to crash. Story 29. You mean the United States President's plan to move United States citizens to an area where United States constitutional protections are difficult to enforce? Might as well call it Auschwitz 2.0. Story 30. Overseas processing has been a thing for illegal immigrants in Australia for a long time. If you fly in, all good. If you're desperate and poor and not white, we ship you off to an island prison. Story 31. The other thing we could use that money on is to feed children and provide healthcare, but, Trump and fascism. As fast as this is happening, I do hope the response is equally as fast. Story 32. It makes me angry and sad. The concentration camp process begins. It was predictable. We told our countrymen it would happen and were called liars and alarmists. And we were right, and people knew or should have known that this is what Trump would do. I'll say it again, anyone that didn't vote for Harris endorsed this, as well as every other horrendous thing that happens as a result of this election. Story 33. Anyone with pattern recognition could see this coming a mile away. It will start with that. They will run out of room and build more detention and processing centers in the state that are passing laws to make crossing illegally punishable by a lifetime in prison. Then comes more slave labor. Story 34. It's a concentration camp. Zero question. Trump is the Antichrist that fooled the Christians somehow and had a wound magically heal, just like the Christians themselves predicted. Story 35. What do you make of President Trump sending illegal immigrants to Guantanamo Bay? Anyone who thinks sending immigrants to a facility designated for terrorists is a good idea while pardoning actual domestic terrorists a few days before doesn't deserve to be respected as, let alone called, a president. End of discussion. Story 36. Just like Hitler sent the Jews to Poland to concentration camps. That way, you can do atrocious things out of the eye of your people and lie about it all. Story 37. Auschwitz wasn't in Germany. They built it in Poland and kept it pretty removed and out of the way, even from the local Polish people, so nobody would know exactly what they were doing there. Story 38. I'm wondering when the rest of the United States finally wakes up to the fact that Trump and the people who support him are Nazis. He's treating migrants like terrorists, dehumanizing them. Guantanamo may be called a detention camp, but we all know what this is. Story 39. Biden should have sent Trump there. Now it's too late. American democracy is lost. There will be civil war, even more rapid climate change, and the whole world will be destroyed in less than 2 to 3 years. Story 40. Proves Trump is a fascist because doing so telegraphs he has no intention of actually deporting them after due process and promptly. It is theater acclimating the public to more fascist oppression until the psychopath is building gas chambers and ovens. Story 41. Our first Guantanamo detention camp was established in the late stages of the George H.W. Bush presidency. The detainees there were not terror suspects, but 300 innocent Haitian refugees seeking safe haven from the military regime. Despite signals on the campaign trail that he intended to shut down the camp, Clinton changed his mind. As a result, the refugees remained, even after he assumed office, in leaky barracks with poor sanitation, surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. Story 42. He said he is going to send 30,000. Guantanamo Bay houses less than 1,000. It is not going to happen. He is just throwing chum into the water for his base to lap up. This administration has no desire to govern. They want to stay in the news cycle, keep generating clicks, and otherwise enrich themselves. Story 43. Guantanamo Bay is a bunch of tents, cinder blocks, and barbed wire, all located on a very small bit of land in Cuba. Currently holds 15 prisoners. How one would build out the necessary infrastructure to increase its size even by a factor of 2, never mind hundreds or thousands, is the kind of picky little detail Donald Trump doesn't bother to consider when he spouts this nonsense. The fact that the man is vile is a given. People really have to start wrapping their heads around the fact that he also has oatmeal between his ears. His stupidity is astonishing, and the only thing more astonishing is that no one seems to realize this fact. I literally doubt he's able to tie his own shoes or get his shirt buttons correct. He wants to rename the Oval Office the Donald Office because he still doesn't understand why they call it the Oval Office. Story 44. This is a camp for people you try not to call prisoners of war so you can do with them what you want. This is a perversion of everything the United States once stood for. Story 45. Honestly, I think this is the beginning of 3 scenarios. 1. There's enough people who've had enough of how things are run and come together to remove these idiots from power. We get a sequel to the Civil War and a lot of people end up dead. There's 1 or more people who've had enough and decide to go full-on Punisher and take the anti-hero route by picking these fools off one by one. Story 46. 1. Government orders an agency to round up brown people and arrest them unless they have papers, or even if they do have papers. Government says they want to put all those people in Guantanamo Bay prison camp. Government starts to strip rights from women, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and anyone else that isn't a white straight man or married to one. Government stops funding for people in need and wants to publicly shame women who have an abortion. Government fires all the government employees that are insubordinate and question human rights violations and actual law. Government wants to amend the Constitution to a dictatorship, keeping the same leader in power. Government erases human rights laws and bullies corporations who refuse to comply. Baby Jesus, racism, and guns, am I right? Story 47. I'm honestly very doubtful this will get very far. Just sounds like more bats hit insane promises to his cult that won't go anywhere. It would be pretty insane to see a politician promise something and actually do it. Jokes aside, this is all very gross. Story 48. Immigrants are costing us a lot of tax money, but we can pay immigration and customs enforcement to round them up, pay for transporting them, and then pay for them to be in prison or camp. Seems a lot more expensive than just letting them work on agriculture farms or in construction, but what do I know? Story 49. How does Donald Trump sleep at night? How do these types of people lack the ability to see things from any perspective but their own, yet claim to be able to lead us all? This administration is full of humanity's failures. Story 50. Ridiculous. At this point, Trump is just trying to see what he can get away with. Wait until his policies start affecting his voters in red states. Talk about being so blinded by your hatred that you are willing to shoot yourself in the foot. Story 51. It's a police state. The camps are never just about the persecuted minority. Political enemies also end up there. Don't normalize authoritarianism.